They told us the warp was distant, that it was a tide beneath the stars, a sickness outside the veil, a storm you could only feel if you stared too long into the void between systems. But they were wrong. It isn't distant. It breathes through the cracks. It waits behind mirrors. And when it comes through, when the veil thins and the warp bleeds, it does not knock. It does not roar. It sings. I remember the moment the hymn began. It wasn't fire, not at first. It wasn't tentacles or flesh grown backwards or demons wreathed in screams. It was just a feeling, a warmth in my teeth, a flickering echo in the vox chambers, a sudden urge to weep when the sirens should have made me run. By the time the administratum agents noticed the glow behind their eyes, it was already too late. By the time the cogitators bled litanies of change, by the time the pict feeds began to whisper prayers in reverse, we had already invited it in. You want to know what happens when the warp bleeds into real space? I'll show you, but not as a scholar, not as a soldier, as a servant, a witness, a fool who welcomed it, and now burns inside it. The first time I heard it, I thought it was my own breath. A low hum, gentle, almost imperceptible, just beneath the usual clatter of the vox towers, the whining servo arms, the endless clicks of data spindles slotting into their metal nests, the tired mutters of tech priests reciting binaric rites with cracked lips. It was the kind of sound you dismissed, like a toothache you'd learned to ignore, like guilt. I'd been posted in the upper relay vault of Hive Secundus, 6 shifts straight without rest. Just another faceless cog in the endless administratum stack, assigned to monitor vox traffic for corruption reports and auspex anomalies. The irony wasn't lost on me, though it would take time before I laughed at it, before I laughed at all. The vault was cold, always cold, that still kind of cold that seeped through plasteel walls and vacuum-sealed uniforms and made your bones forget how to be warm. I remember wrapping my fingers around the recirculated caffeine flask, watching my breath fog in the light of the lumen strips and thinking, this place is dead. Nothing new, nothing strange, nothing alive. But then the Vox panel chirped. Just once. A flicker, a blink of the green status rune like an eyelid twitching mid-dream. Not a warning, not even a priority flag. Just a pulse. I tapped the panel, rebooted the relay rune, checked for static leakage. The hum didn't stop, and slowly it started to rise. Not louder, just closer. The kind of shift you feel in your teeth before your ears. A resonance that made the cogitator keys feel warm under my fingertips. As if the machine spirit within the panel wasn't just aware. It was listening back. I should have logged it. I should have submitted a report, but some part of me, the part that dreamed in blue sparks and faded prayers, wanted to hear more. So I stayed. The next day, the song came again. Clearer. Beneath the audio logs, under the static-filtered vox traffic from nearby sectors. Beneath the emergency frequencies. Under the distress beacons from ships that had never registered docking clearance. I began isolating the signal, not officially, just for myself, just to understand. That's when I heard words, not in Gothic, not even in Binaric, just syllables that weren't syllables. Pulses that weren't quite sound, but they meant something. I felt it in the meat of my mind, like memories from another life, like dreams I hadn't had yet. I stopped sleeping. I stopped reporting to the Medicaid outposts for routine cognition checks. Instead, I listened. I listened as the song bloomed. Not everyone heard it at first. The senior adept, Darnus, he just dismissed it as power bleed. Too many failed Vox rigs bleedings into the secondary net, he'd said, waving his incense wand without even looking up from his slate. Happens during magnetic shifts. Ignore it. But then he stopped showing up. 3 days later, we found his body in the lavatorium trench, folded neatly as if he had lain himself down for sleep. Only he had no eyes. Just two Vox cables threaded into the sockets, pulsing weakly with residual charge. The Mechanicus claimed sabotage, said it was a cultist act. They weren't wrong, but they weren't right either. Because Darnus hadn't been murdered, he'd joined something. By the 6th day, the song began to echo across the lower Hab levels. Civilians started reporting shared dreams, visions of golden circuits snaking through the sky, of burning trees that whispered secrets in binary flame. Some called it madness, others called it prophecy, and a few, like me, stopped calling it anything at all. Because naming it meant we understood it, and we didn't. We couldn't. All we could do was listen. The Vox array began to change, not the hardware, the sound, the tone. It stopped being an interference pattern. It shaped itself like it was teaching us, like it was tuning to us. At first, it mirrored our own transmissions, then it answered them. I remember sending a test ping across a secured administratum line. Just 5 seconds of static-coded liturgy. Standard machine write. Nothing dangerous. It replied with my own voice. Only it wasn't repeating my words. It was finishing my sentence. No one believed me, of course, not at first. They still saw me as that low-born Vox tech, the one who'd scraped his way out of the labor pits with half a spine and less faith. But the moment it replied to the sub-cleric's prayer, in the voice of his dead wife, something shifted. They started listening, too. But by then it was too late. The hum had nested. The song wasn't coming from the panels anymore. It was in us, in our ears, in the rustle of our robes, in the scratches on our data slates. I caught myself humming it under my breath long after the cogitators had gone dark. We burned the vault twice, prayed 3 times, replaced every circuit we could. The hymn survived. The machine spirit welcomed it. Then came the moment the chant moved the air. I was alone late into 4th shift, rerouting a broken signal from a downed Skitarii patrol when I felt it. A gust of wind in a sealed chamber. Not air pressure, not ventilation. A breath. Something behind me. I turned. The lumen strips had dimmed. The pick screen across the relay vault had begun bleeding light, not flickering. Bleeding. Golden white at first, then red, then green, then something I couldn't name. Shapes rippled across it, not images, not data, just ideas. Symbols I understood and forgot at the same time. That was when I knew. The Vox wasn't just broken. It had become a window, and something was looking through it. They say the warp is a realm of thought, that it mirrors the mind, reflects the soul, that it cannot touch you unless you let it in. But that's a lie told by men who've never seen it move beneath their skin. A lie told by priests with silver masks and no eyes left to weep. I know now, the warp doesn't need permission, it doesn't ask. It remembers you better than you remember yourself. The first transformation happened on the 33rd hour after the hymn broke containment. We'd already lost Vox integrity across 4 Hab blocks, and the picked feeds had begun to display looping images of places that didn't exist. A ruined cathedral beneath an ocean of flame. A starless sky rippling like flesh. A face that wasn't a face whispering in every frame. The Adeptus Arbites declared martial lockdown. No one in or out. Curfew sealed. Rations suspended, but no one noticed. Because by then no one was hungry. Not in the normal way. I remember the tech adept from level 7 Carthus. Broad shoulders, neck implants, eyes the color of rusted chrome. He'd been reciting scripture by rote, repeating the rite of second ignition for hours without error. Until he stopped mid-line, turned to me and said, "It's inside the joints now." Then he smiled, and his mouth kept smiling, kept stretching. Not like something forced it open, like something remembered how it was meant to open. His cheeks split sideways, His skin unzipped down to his clavicle, folding back like wet parchment. No blood, just that same greenish light humming beneath his muscle as if veins had become lumens. His spine flared outward, not bones, not anymore. More like antennae, like wings made from memory and metal both. He didn't scream. He sang, and when we tried to run, the floor pulled upward like a curtain, not breaking, rearranging. That's when I realized it wasn't just the people. The station had begun to remember too. The corridors were wrong. The rivets curved inwards now like knuckles. Pipes bent where there were no seams. Bulkheads blinked. One wall near the promethium rack sighed open like a gill and exhaled a cloud of spores that whispered names, names of people who hadn't been born yet. And the smell. Emperor, preserve me, the smell, hot copper and incense, wax and rot, something sacred trapped under skin too long. The scent of prayers half digested by a god that had no mouth but still chewed. Everywhere I ran, the walls pulsed, they breathed, they watched. The manufactorum groaned like an animal choking on its own bones. Alarms became laughter. Fire suppression servitors dumped ichor instead of foam. The pick screens showed us footage from places we'd never been. Children playing on a sunless beach. A funeral procession led by blind birds. A man vomiting stars. At one point, I tried to find a way out. Some logical corridor, a ladder, anything that could take me up through the hive stack. But the elevators were gone, not locked, gone. Every time I reached the same lift shaft, the number above it changed. Sometimes letters, sometimes glyphs, sometimes a scream etched into brass. In one stairwell, the walls were lined with faces, familiar faces, my mother, my old sergeant, a lover I hadn't seen since the Underhive riots of 994 M41. All smiling, all melting. I looked down at my hands and I didn't recognize them. The skin was soft, too soft, like it hadn't finished forming. The veins pulsed with light. I blinked, and the fingers changed lengths, not grew. Changed, as if they remembered being different once, as if they missed it. I heard a scream then, real this time, a wet gargling shriek that echoed through 4 floors of the stack. I followed it. I don't know why. Maybe because I thought I could help. Maybe because part of me still thought I was human. I found her in a supply vault, a servitor tech, young, maybe 16 Terran cycles at most. She was kneeling beside a broken wall. Only the wall wasn't broken, it was weeping. A kind of oil tear ran down its surface, black and gold and fizzing with motes of data. She turned toward me. Her face was normal, beautiful even. Until I realized she had no eyes. Only sockets of swirling warp light, each one orbiting a tiny metal gear that turned and clicked like a prayer wheel. She smiled. Her teeth were gone. Her tongue was a rosary. She whispered, "It's remembering you too." And then she burst, not exploded, burst, like a flower blooming in reverse. Her skin peeled open into 8 perfectly symmetrical petals. Her ribs unfolded, her lungs sang. I dropped to my knees and I wept, not for her, for myself, because I felt something inside me shifting, something soft, patient, ancient, something that had always been there. The warp wasn't changing us, it was reminding us, stripping away the lies, the flesh, the years of false prayers and machine chants and chemical balances. It tore down what the Imperium had built and found what was underneath. And what was underneath was hungry. We were told the Emperor's light could never be extinguished. That even in the deepest depths of the hive, even in the hollowed-out ventricles of ancient manufactura, his radiance endured. But now, standing beneath the altar of the chapel of the wounded Aquila, watching the stained glass saints liquefy under a heatless light, I realized faith burns too. The priests were the last to break. while we howled and forgot our names, while the world peeled itself into kaleidoscopic meat and memory they held firm. Shouting canticles, lighting censers, casting holy oil across walls that had started whispering sermons of their own. The Ministorum had always ruled with iron belief. But iron rusts, and belief bends when reality becomes suggestion. I remember Father Salix. His voice thundered with vox enhancement, and his breath always reeked of sacred incense and something faintly metallic. He stood on the marble dais, arms wide, clutching the reliquary of Saint Veximus like a weapon. Behind him, the candles burned green, their flames pointed sideways. "Do not listen to the voices," he roared. "They come not from the God Emperor. They come from the mirror of the soul, the storm without center. You must reject them even as they wear the face of your kin." But his hands trembled, not from fear, from rhythm. They twitched in time with a beat no one else heard. He was already half listening. We didn't blame him. By that point, the world had no axis, no up, no down. Time looped in whispers. Men aged backwards, then vanished. Sermons echoed from mouths that had not opened. Some people walked into shadows and re-emerged younger, brighter, weeping with joy. Others screamed hymns while tearing off their skin, revealing scrolls written underneath. Names, instructions, dates that hadn't come yet. And still the priests prayed. One morning, if such a word meant anything anymore, we emerged into the chapel again to find every icon of the Emperor inverted. Not defaced, not destroyed, just different. His halo was now an eye, his sword a quill, his armor bloomed with thorns. Every mural had been redrawn in colors that had no name, in pigments that hissed when touched. And no one remembered repainting them, not even the servitors, not even Father Salix. That was the day the chapel windows blinked. We had gathered beneath the altar, desperate for direction, for anything that still felt true. The windows shimmered, once glorious depictions of the triumph of Macragge, the martyrdom of St. Keela, the siege of the Eternity Gate. Now they pulsed, lids of light and glass opening to reveal landscapes none of us had ever seen. A cathedral built entirely of flame, where silhouettes chanted inside the fire. A forest of clockwork trees, each leaf ticking in time with 1,000 heartbeats. A sunken city where giants walked beneath the ocean, screaming poetry. Each pain a vision, each vision a sermon. The priests tried to destroy them, but the glass resisted flame. Lost fire only made the images clearer. One window shattered, just one, and the sound it made was not of breaking. It was laughter. After that, Father Salix ordered the chapel sealed. But the sermons kept coming. They bled from the stone. Scripture oozed across the floors, words forming in molten brass, moving like veins. Some tried to scrub it away. Some tried to read it. I watched one scribe, young, bright, sharp, begin to transcribe the glyphs into her data slate. Line after line of glowing prophecy, symbols dancing at the edge of sense. By the 50th line, she began to speak them aloud. By the 70th, she didn't have a mouth anymore, just a smooth face with a single blinking rune where her lips had been. The rune pulsed in time with the chapel lights. She walked out into the ash wastes beyond the hive, singing. We never saw her again. And the slate she left behind, it wrote by itself. Some claimed it was the work of Tzeentch, the changer, the architect, the Lord of Secrets. Some even dared to whisper his name. But others said no, that what we faced was older, more primal, that chaos had many faces, and not all of them bore horns. Some just wore yours. I clung to that thought as I knelt beside the altar, my fingers pressed to the ash-covered stone. The floor beneath me pulsed ever so gently, not with heat, with breath. A sigh rising from the foundation of the hive. I wanted to believe. Truly I did. Even now, part of me whispered the old prayers. Part of me begged the throne for light, for mercy, for memory. But another part, a quieter, deeper part, listened. Listened to the lullaby in the walls, the way the air hummed with recognition, the way the silence answered questions I hadn't spoken aloud, the way the sermon behind the sermon made more sense than anything the priests had ever offered. I raised my head, and I saw him, or something that looked like him, the Emperor, standing at the center of the chapel, only not as before. His face was cracked, not broken, peeling, like a mask, and behind it was not a man, not even a god, but a mirror that showed me, and in that moment I believed. For the first time in my life, I believed. We expected the warp to descend or to tear open the stars like rotten fruit and rain horrors down from the heavens. That was the old myth, the caution told in void schools and catechism wards. The truth is far crueler. When the warp bleeds, it does not fall from above. It bleeds inward. It seeps. It whispers through cracks in walls that were never built. It remembers you from the inside out. It began with the reflections, puddles in the ash, broken mirrors in the dormitories, shattered pick screens and cracked armor-polished tins, anything with a surface, anything that caught light. First, they showed the wrong angle, a delay, a twitch, a shadow too slow to move. Then they showed other places, a corridor lined with teeth, a planet that screamed instead of turning. A nursery where infants floated like candles in zero gravity, singing a hymn in no tongue I recognized. Then the reflections started showing us, but not the way we were, the way we had been, the way we might become. I remember catching my own gaze in the glint of a servo skull's ocular lens and seeing myself, older, robed in wires, speaking without lips. My hands were gone, replaced by sigil-wrapped tentacles that typed faster than thought. I saw the words I was writing. He already lives inside the silence, over and over, until my reflection smiled at me and winked. We tried to destroy the reflective surfaces, but that only made the air reflective. The light bent wrong. It coiled around our eyes, our memories rewound. One man claimed he had lived this entire week before, died in it even. Another wept for a wife he had not yet married. A third walked into the infirmary and collapsed, screaming, "I just saw myself eating me." I was delicious. Then came the event horizon, not in space. In the chapel corridor, a shimmer, a distortion at the edge of the world. A door that should have led to the supply vaults now opened into something else, a corridor of flesh, of breath. Every step made the walls inhale. Lights flickered like neurons firing, and the further you walked, the more your thoughts echoed. Not in your mind, in your mouth. Words you hadn't spoken yet began forming on your tongue. You tasted them, knew their shape. Some people swallowed them, others let them out. Those who spoke them changed. One scribe, old, scarred, devout, recited a phrase the air gave her, a single perfect sentence. The end has already remembered us. She burst into light, not fire, not flame, light. She shone until her bones gleamed through her skin, until her body cracked open into a prism, and what stepped out was still her. But not. It called itself her echo, and it began writing symbols across the walls in blood that smelled like burned feathers. Above us, the sky fractured. I know how that sounds. But I saw it. We ascended to the outer hatchways, hoping to signal orbit for extraction. Hoping the fleet had not been lost, had not been corrupted. We opened the blast shutters. What we saw turned language to vapor. The sky had peeled, not split. Peeled. Like a lid. Like someone had lifted the top layer of reality to peek beneath. Beneath it was not void. It was something watching. It had no face, no edges, no name. But it had presence, pressure. You could feel it pressing down, turning your blood to mist, your bones to questions. It was as if the entire planet had been placed under glass and someone enormous, had leaned down to examine us. Someone with hands made of time, someone whose breath slowed the turning of the sun. We tried to pray, but our tongues forgot the words. We tried to run, but the hallways repeated. We tried to die, but even death had been looped. I watched a man throw himself from the highest spire and land, alive, in the same spot seconds later, confused and screaming. I saw a medici impale herself on a steel rod, only for the rod to unforge itself, pulling back out of her body like it had never been made. The warp had not just entered the world, it had entered chronology. Cause and effect bled into one another. I once reached for a door and touched it an hour before I arrived, and yet, amid the terror, something else bloomed. A kind of clarity. The world had become alive, not just moving, not just mutating, responding. To us, to me. When I whispered, the walls listened. When I thought, they answered. When I feared, they showed me the reason. It wasn't punishment, it wasn't conquest, it was recognition. We had opened a wound in reality, and now reality was remembering what bled. I don't remember how I reached the core. No corridor took me there, no lift descended. I didn't walk, I was taken. One moment I was in the chapel vestibule listening to the melted voxcasters breathe a language made of shapes, and the next, I was beneath everything, beneath stone, beneath ash, beneath the hive, beneath time. The space was not a chamber, it was a pulse. It throbbed like a wound or a heart, and I stood at its center. I don't know if I was clothed, I don't know if I even had a body anymore. I felt peeled, reduced, the way old paper curls in firelight, shedding ink, becoming only smoke. All that remained of me was awareness, and even that frayed. I saw no light, yet everything was lit. I heard no sound, yet my skull rang with echoes I hadn't earned. The floor, if it could be called that, breathed in sigils. Each breath exhaled meaning, not words, not even thoughts, just realities. Memories of places that never were. Whole civilizations born and extinguished in the twitch of a glyph. Mountains built of questions, oceans made of mourning. And in the center of it all, floating just inches above the impossible floor, was the heart. Not a heart as we know it, not meat, not muscle. A knot of reality bound by rhythm. It pulsed in perfect, unrelenting beat. With each thrum, the air rippled, the stones sang. The past remembered itself, and I understood. This was not a demon, not a god, not a trick of the warp. This was a truth so old it forgot how to lie. It had no face, it did not speak. It was. It is. It always had been. I approached, or perhaps I didn't move at all, and maybe it came to me. Movement was obsolete in this place. Space did not matter, only intention. The closer I got, the less I remained. First, my name. I watched it drift from my mind like pollen. Useless now. A tag pinned to something that no longer existed. Then my memories, not erased, but absorbed, like ingredients in a soup. I could still taste them, but they were no longer mine. I saw myself from the outside, a boy scrubbing promethium stains from the floor of an underhive dispensary. A young man whispering into dead vox panels, trying to find someone still listening. A believer, a cynic, a ghost, all gone, all shared. The heart did not judge. It welcomed. It opened like a fruit cut lengthwise, and I saw what was inside. A spiral of selves, lives unlived, paths untaken. I saw versions of me, as a missionary, a traitor, a weapon, a son, each one unfolding, laughing, screaming, praying. All of them bled into one truth. There is no such thing as oneself. The warp does not corrupt. It reminds. It strips away the emperor's lie. The lie of shape, the lie of purpose, the lie of obedience. What we call mutation, it is remembrance. We were always this. We chose to forget. And now the universe was choosing to recall us. I do not know how long I stood in that beat. Could have been a second, could have been 1,000 years compressed into the flutter of a dream. But when I stepped away, or woke, or fell upwards through the folds of space, I was different. No longer flesh, not quite spirit, but something that could carry the hymn. I emerged back into the hive. What was left of it? The towers had bent sideways, forming a circle of teeth around the core. The manufactorum had curled into a chrysalis of machine bone and data blood. The priests no longer screamed. They chanted, without tongues. And the people, what was left of them, danced in patterns that mirrored the pulse of the heart. Some wept in joy. Others carved messages into their skin, not madness, but blueprints, warnings, invitations. I joined them, not as a prophet, not as a monster, as a message. I do not walk anymore. I flow. I do not speak. I echo. I do not think. I remember. I am not alone. I am every voice that ever believed something was wrong with the stars, something just behind the light. Every worker who looked into a flickering lumen and thought, this isn't just broken, it's waking up. The warp is not a realm. It is a language. And I am its first punctuation. Now, as I write these words into a slate that no longer transmits, as the final Vox beacon blinks its last code across the void, I whisper not a warning, but a welcome. It is coming. Not to punish, to remind. And when it does, when your walls bleed and your prayers laugh, when your bones rewrite your name into something truer, do not fear. You're not being devoured, you're being returned. You're not dying, you're being read aloud. The warp is remembering you. And I am already behind your eyes,